Imagine a political landscape in 2024 where the stakes are not just high but they are history-shaping. At its center stands Donald Trump, once again proposing sweeping economic plans that promise prosperity but come with profound consequences. His vision is bold, direct, and unapologetic, rooted in the same aggressive themes that characterized his first presidency, yet elevated to an even grander scale.
Trump's strategy begins with a move that feels almost like a magician pulling a rabbit out of his hat: tax cuts. But not just any tax cuts. These are designed to be permanent extensions of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, known shortly as TCJA, which slashed rates for individuals and businesses. Now he wants to push the corporate tax rate even lower, down to 15%, targeting domestic manufacturing to turbocharge American industry. His message to corporations is clear: invest here, build here, and profit more here. While on paper, this sounds like a recipe for economic expansion, the numbers tell a more complex story. The allure of these tax reductions lies in the potential for immediate economic stimulation, increased capital investments, higher employment, a gross domestic product boost of around 0.4%. Capital stock will increase by about 0.8% and also an increase in employment by 93,000. Yet, lurking in the shadows is a daunting figure: the projected $3 trillion increase in the national debt over a decade. Economists caution that this mounting debt won't be without a consequence. As borrowing costs rise, the pressure could eventually squeeze federal spending. This leads to a reduction in federal revenue by $673 billion from 2025 to 2034 on conventional basis. After factoring in positive economic feedback on federal revenues, the proposal would reduce revenue by about $460 billion over 10 years. In 2034, revenue would fall by $75 billion on a conventional basis, but by a smaller $40 billion on a dynamic basis. It's a high-risk gamble, a promise of prosperity today in exchange for potentially crippling financial burdens tomorrow. But tax policy is just the beginning. Trump's plans also pivot to a theme familiar from his previous tenure: protectionism, which is a government policy that restricts international trade to protect domestic industries. This is often done by imposing tariffs on imported goods, setting quotas on the amount of goods that can be imported, or implementing other regulations that make it more difficult for foreign goods to compete with domestic products. Picture this: America encircled by a 20% tariff wall on all imports, with a towering 60% tariff barrier against goods from China. His narrative is one of economic patriotism, a pledge to defend U.S. industry and labor from foreign competition. Yet behind this protective shield lies a brewing storm. Analysts predict that while some domestic sectors may enjoy temporary shelter, the cost of goods will inevitably rise for consumers and the global trade partners who won't take this economic aggression lying down. Retaliatory tariffs could hammer American exports, shrinking long-term economic output and destabilizing trade relationships. According to Investing.com, the imposition of tariffs under a potential second Trump administration is expected to prompt a response from affected nations that mirrors the measured retaliation strategies observed during his first term. Analysts at Capital Economics suggest that while countries are likely to retaliate against the economic strain of U.S. tariffs, these responses will aim to limit further escalation and avoid significant domestic repercussions. Historically, every targeted country, except Japan, retaliated to the U.S. tariffs during Trump's first term. However, these retaliatory measures were calculated to minimize the risk of a spiraling trade conflict. For instance, nations imposed tariffs on politically sensitive U.S. exports, such as the European Union targeting Harley-Davidson, motorcycles, and bourbon whiskey. This strategy sought to pressurize the U.S. policymakers while safeguarding local economies from inflationary impacts. Countries also adjusted their approach over time. Instead of solely imposing counter-tariffs, they engaged in negotiations, offering concessions to the U.S. in exchange for tariff relief. Mexico and Canada managed to mitigate some trade restrictions through adjustments in the USMCA agreement, while nations like Japan and the EU negotiated market access and purchase commitment to ease tariff threats. However, it doesn't stop there. Trump's vision extends deep into the regulatory landscape, where he seeks to dismantle environmental and financial regulations that he argues hinder economic freedom. His targets include the Inflation Reduction Act, which poured hundreds of billions into green energy initiatives and climate change mitigation. By rescinding these measures, Trump aims to unchain traditional energy sectors like oil and coal, offering them a chance to thrive unencumbered. But the environmental costs of such a reversal could be catastrophic, exacerbating climate change and stalling the growth of renewable energy. The financial sector, meanwhile, might enjoy the reprieve of reduced oversight, by experts warn of the potential for unchecked excesses that could lead to another crisis. Connecting these threads reveals a narrative filled with tension and contrasts. On one side, Trump paints a portrait of revitalized America, booming with businesses and unshackled from regulations. Energy and manufacturing sectors are poised to shine, while corporate profits could soar under the reduced tax burden. But beneath this promise of economic glory lies a delicate balancing act. The swelling national debt threatens long-term economic health. Protectionist policies risk global isolation, and deregulation endangers both environmental sustainability and financial security. At the end, do Trump's economic plans make sense for the future, or are we trading lasting solutions for temporary gains? Let me know your thoughts below.